Hi there, Jordan checking in before we get to the episode to check in on your holiday season so far. Do you have what you need, or could you use a little bit more? Well, one way to make sure you always have what you need is using my friend Spec. The Spec platform enables teams to instantly access and add new applications using real time data, optimize system performance, and replace underperforming tools. Need IDV? They have that ready for you to turn on right now. Need email reputation? Yep, let's go. Very next transaction. What about a full rules engine and device ID? Locked and loaded. What's even better is Spec securely collects rich user session data in real time, enabling continuous and secure threat monitoring without the reliance on tamper-prone JavaScript or tracking tags. When threats are detected, Spec can remediate the issue before the user even leaves the site. Check out www.specprotected today to learn more how they can help you this very holiday season. Now let's get to the episode. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Fraud Boxer. I'm doing another episode of the Bros Talking Fraud, and I got both the bros on here today. I got Brian and Alexander. So how are you guys both doing today?
Good, the trio you didn't know you needed.
That's right. See, and we are the trifecta now. Alexander, it's always good to see you over there. You're not
Thank you,
sweating
sir.
anymore in Phoenix, are you?
No, the weather's finally tapered down. I think we're at 70 degrees finally. Yeah, it's
All right.
beautiful.
Enjoy it while you can, because it'll be right back up over 100 pretty soon, I'm sure. Christmas Day, it'll be a scorcher. So yeah, we kind of just got on this. Brian, this was your idea to jump back on the mics again and just record. We don't really have an outline, which is not something that I really do very often. But I think the three of us are very capable of carrying a conversation for an amount of time that's interesting and touches on some of the stuff that's happening in the industry. And I think that that's where we'll go with this, is just what's going on. So kind of want to just talk to each one of you guys about what you're doing these days. What are you up to in the fraud world? And Alexander, let's start with you, man. What are you up to these days?
Yeah, well, I in September, I ended up. I think we talked about this on your last one. I got laid off from over at Approved, so I went back to operating independently, and now I'm focusing on actually working with merchants directly. I've pivoted from supporting vendors and helping with their product management and their marketing efforts. Now I'm moving directly into consulting with merchants and some financial institutions. There was some interest. I'm sure everyone's heard there was interest at Money 2020. So yeah, I'm focusing on strategy development, consulting with merchants and financial institutions directly. That's the big news for me.
Excellent. And I think you guys both went to Money 2020, right?
Nope, I wasn't able to make it out this time.
Yeah, I was at the MRC over in Singapore. That was my first time in Southeast Asia, so that was pretty interesting for me. But yeah, I want to go next year. I put it in my budget for next year. Let's hope I get it. But because that's a big one. I'd like to go. So Brian, I know you've been doing a lot of stuff too these days. I see a lot of posts, a lot of new things with you. What have you been up to, man?
I like to keep myself busy. I guess it's all kind of around content and driving feedback and insights from that. It goes into a couple different areas, from dodgeball, helping kind of the next iteration of fraud journey orchestration and the types of features and functionalities that coming pretty soon. I'm pretty excited about some of that. And then turning my newsletter itself into a book, and changed the format a couple of weeks ago. And now I'm kind of bringing people along as I'm writing this book on a week to week basis, sharing what I'm thinking as I write this book. It also holds myself accountable. I said I'm going to write a book on a lot of this content I'm writing, and I'll probably never do it. So this was my way of being like, all right, I'm changing the format. I'm probably going to lose some people. That's okay. The people who are here to support me, I appreciate it. And now I get to kind of how my brain is thinking about this, hold myself accountable. And now my newsletter is becoming a little bit more substance week over week. And then the ultimate bit of that is a book out of it. I don't know if it'll ever be published. Maybe I'll just give it away from free. Maybe it'll just be an evergreen newsletter. I don't know, but it's pretty cool to just challenge myself to do new skills. From that, though, you kind of learn different things of like people are missing aspects of how to develop and build their career. And part of it is the job market today of there are lots of layoffs, people are still laying off, there are tight budgets, they can't really travel to shows. Companies who had budgets and used to send us certain shows aren't sending people to shows. No one wants to sign up for webinars anymore. The word webinar just kind of
I think
scares
webinar
people.
overload, it seems like these days.
Exactly. So there's this gap now, though, of how do I learn from people? How do I meet people? How do I actually build the career I want? So one idea that I'm kind of working on is actually bringing together a space for people here. More, though, around content itself. Content has been fun for me. Content is a way that I can help raise more voices in our space. So instead of just being a community, say, hey, here's an empty, scary house. People come on in. You have similar problems. Good luck meeting people. I'm out of here. That doesn't work. It's just going to fail. You see it time and time again. I failed myself on that. So it's finding ways and avenues to share more stories, teach more people, and not just be me, share more voices along the way. So it's more of a hosting platform is how I think about it, of a community of bringing together this knowledge, these experiences, these events and moments to just say like, hey, I'm going through that too, or hey, this was a win for me this week, and build that genuine network that people have been missing out when they just can't travel to these shows. Or you are able to go to these shows and all right, it was once a year. What do I do the other 64 days?
That's a good way to put it. Like, you know, the MRC of course has their communities forum that we all probably get daily email digest, but it's more Q&A. It's just people asking a question and then a bunch of people jumping in, right in wrong answers, telling them what they should do. I think the way that you've been approaching this, and Alexander and I both have been a part of what you've been working on so far, you know, of recording these little digestible pieces that are interesting. And I think one of the angles that like you've talked about is focusing more on the middle part, because there is a lot of content. I think the MRC has done that. And there's a couple other podcasts that are very much like Fraud 101. What do you do first time you've seen this sort of thing? But like to your point with if trying to focus kind of on the middle part, you know, more of the leadership pieces, what happens when you're more of a manager, what happens with more sophisticated problems when you're a little further along in your fraud journey. You know, you gotta be careful. Let's say fraud fighters. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, you know, like Alexander, you did a couple of little things too, and I did too. Did you put out the ones that we did yet? I can't remember.
Nope. Clips have been coming out, and that's it. The full videos themselves will be live on the platform when I launch that community. So the full videos themselves will only be on within the community. Week over week, I'll start to share more videos as I get them edited. I'm also learning how to edit. So it's kind of like a learning curve there by my own self. So once I kind of get those ramped up of figuring out the other business operations, then that'll speed up things. And then more clips will be coming to help kind of share the bits, the pieces. So people, if like, hey, I don't want to be a part of the community, I just want to scroll LinkedIn, that these little nuggets are there for them that they can learn on their own. Just different route of learning, different style of learning.
If I add like when I do when I put out new episodes, if I put like a little audio clip on there, the engagement on the post is like 10-1 versus if I just put like a picture up or like nothing on there. So yeah, Alexander, you've been doing any webinars lately? You were doing webinars for a while there.
I'll answer that in just one second. First, let me give Brian his due props for the editing he did on our little clips. That was clean. It was easy to digest. So you're working on it. You're succeeding at it, sir.
And the katana story made it in. The katana story again.
Right.
That was good.
As for webinars, I've done a few private ones, like private events for like where they're in person and you're calling. I was calling in remotely. But as far as all content creation across the board, I've kind of slowed down. I'm more focused on where the rubber meets the road, fraud prevention work, driving ROI aspect of stuff. So no, I've slowed down quite a bit, but it's a pretty steady thing.
Why don't you tell us, since we weren't at Money 2020, why don't you tell us some cool stuff that you saw there and some of your thoughts on that?
I had 20 different meetings that were set up. This is the first time that I offered flash strategy sessions where, two of us will sit down, 15 minutes. We'll talk about a high level overview about what your organization is experiencing, what technology is in place, what kind of data you're leveraging at different data points. And I quickly try to ascertain something that they can walk away with that's practical and actionable for them and their team. So that was really cool. That was very well received. And when I met up with fellow vendors that were there and kind of described what it was that I was doing, Spec being one of them. Hey, Spec.
Thank you, Spec, for your generosity. We appreciate you as our favorite sponsor.
They received the messaging very well. So it's kind of empowering is what it was. As for an interesting concept of what was in play at Money 2020, it was really interesting to see how much interaction. Do you hear that over the mic? I think I'm in an apartment. I think they're working in the unit next door. And actually, it sounds like they're dragging a washer dryer somewhere.
You probably just heard a murder over there, and they're dragging like a 50-gallon drum out of there.
Sorry.
Close your windows, close your blinds.
Well, as for what I saw at Money 2020, I think the thing that was most interesting was like I mentioned, how receptive financial institutions and fintechs and credit unions are to conversations. They're actually looking for conversations. These after hours events were cram-packed full of attendees, of course, as is the case always. But to see the number of FIs and all the subsidiaries of FIs was really interesting. And then the conversations that they had, they're expanding out their digital footprint and their digital offerings to their clients and the businesses that are signing up for them or with them. And conversations were just great. I think that we're getting more coverage. Fraud prevention as a whole is experiencing more coverage, as made evident by Money 2020.
Yeah, Brian, have you guys been over at Dodgeball? Been seeing more fintech people coming around, kicking the tires, doing that sort of stuff?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think it's education on the category as a whole has been ramping up. And 2 years ago, no one really knew who any of the players were. And they're like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you. Last MRC, people were seeking us out, and I'm sure not the only ones, be like, we heard about this. We want to learn about this. So that momentum has just been continuing and continuing. The value, obviously, yes, then leads to some of these bigger companies, more surface area that care about different checkpoints of the user journey of the different types of fraud risk, not just a single solution, plug and play, and I don't really care about it, set it and forget it, someone else's problem now. So it's when they really care, they invest in it, and they have multiple areas of abuse on their platform. That's when it starts.
That's a good point, because for so many years, a lot of these fintechs, especially like the traditional banks and traditional insurers, have like probably been used to like the way that they've done things, and like they've built their own tools that they've done for their own sort of risk mitigations that they've done, their own checking, and of course some of the big banks have used some of the big tools, like the certifiers and things like that. But as liability has come to being shifted back towards issuers more, and technology's become a lot more in front of everybody's face, it seems almost like that build versus buy question has hit the banks more than ever. And it's like, do we need to build our own IDV? Do we need to build our own step-up authentication when we could go out to the market and have somebody that's already built that professionally, that works really well, and plug that in? Like, they're finally starting to see that. And I think they probably there has to be some sort of in the back of their minds that they don't want to hit the news in a bad way. Like
there's some of the scare tactic, but the other side that people are starting to realize is, if we build it, we then have to maintain it, and no one wants to maintain it. No one wants to spend any resources of any side, not technical, non-technical, of maintaining it. So when it comes to build versus buy, it's not just build versus buy, it's build and maintain versus buy. Build versus buy is a lot easier of a decision. But when you bring into like, we just can't, what happens is the engineer who builds it, they're so dedicated, they're so in the weeds, they excel at this project, they get promoted, they go to a new job. And then some other engineer, the unlucky soul, then comes in and says, this is your project now. We need to improve it. And they're like, I have no idea what's going on. They slap a couple of Band-Aids on it, rinse and repeat. 3 years down the line now, and we're not even talking a long time, 3 years down the line, it is an awful mess of band-aids that then no one wants to touch. And it gets worse and worse. It becomes more political. And it's like, all right, that actually is what should be equated into build versus buy, because that's the
Yeah.
reality. And the end users, the investigators, the managers, the leaders who are trying to say, I need to investigate, and then I need to report how my team's doing and the impact of my fraud strategy. There is no visibility. There is no way to actually show impact. So then that team is now stuck. I have this clunky tool that's not invested in, and because of how it was put together, I can't show my value, my work. I have gut feeling. I know what I'm doing, but that has a foundation that can poke holes on it through and through. So it puts these legacy systems, the people who actually own it and manage it on a day to day, in awful situations.
I think one of the things that I remember distinctly is a company that I used to work for. We decided that we weren't going to use a machine learning model from a third party. We were going to build our own. And it was great. And we had great data scientists that were very capable of doing that. I don't want to take anything away from them. And they built a great model. And then we were just going to plug it into our tool. Basically, it was going to make our own score using our own data, no third party data, no enrichments, nothing like that, based on our own user activity. But the AWS hosting of running that model was more expensive than our existing fraud tool that we could have just used theirs, and been probably pretty ballpark. And that was just something I remember looking at. I'm like, this is way more expensive. Not only we had 3 data scientists working on it for like 16 months, but then we have the hosting, then we have all of the overhead that people never really thought of. I'm like, guys, these companies exist because they do this at scale with multiple clients already to lighten the load of the cost across all of these clients, spread it across. And they're really good at it. Like, that's the thing, is like, for me, in what I do, especially like, well, I'm in e-commerce now specifically, but like, I don't need to be a cybersecurity company. I sell vitamins. Like, that's what I do. I'll buy a cybersecurity product. I don't need to pretend to be a CDN. I don't need to pretend to build custom checkouts or any of those things. Those things exist by people that's what they do all day. And like you said, like, those products get updated and invested in on their side, and new features enhanced and sent to us, for us to use. But I think especially like with the way like the orchestration stuff's going, and I know like it's the buzzword. I even did that one when I was over in MRC Santa Clara. Brian, you're an orchestrator right there. My sponsor Spec is an orchestrator as well. And I did the MRC session with Spec in Santa Clara, and that's where I think a lot of these historically difficult businesses that it takes a long time to make a change. And like you said, like, some of these changes, like, they take so long to make that people can even cycle out of the role before that change is made. But these orchestrators, I think, are going to be instrumental in the future, being the ability to, oh shit, now we need to add IDV. Okay, we've already integrated one time with this orchestrator. Who can we get that's on their platform already to turn on IDV? Or we need to do address verification, or we need to do email verification, depending on what happens. Like, like Faster Payments is a great example for fintechs. This was something that was kind of pushed upon them. And there's the main 3 providers like FedNow and RTP, that are like, they're picking one of these systems to probably use, but based on how the liability is going to shake out in the end of the day, 50-50 liabilities, look at what it's going to be for the issuer to issuer on these peer-to-peer, like direct deposit banks. It's going to be, they're going to be looking to the market for what can they do. And if they already have like a tool, like an orchestration platform in place, they can then really go in and look at exactly what they need specifically for their type of customers, because a Chase customer is a lot different than a neobank customer. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. How underbanked people, when they get banked, run their bank accounts is drastically different than, a Chase private client. That's just the nature of it. So the different types of interactions that you need and the expectations from those consumers is going to be very different. And you need to be able to kind of change on the fly, because you didn't know like Faster Payments was coming, but now it's here. So what can you do about it? If you have an orchestrator, you could do something about it right now.
I'll say to speed's going to be incredibly important to that. So being able to answer questions like, you're dropping in all these tools. You named the full stack of all these tools. Okay, how long does it take for one tool to run? 100 milliseconds,
That's
1,000
true.
milliseconds, 500 milliseconds. What's an acceptable limit? What's not an acceptable limit? And then where is the error rate? Are there tools erroring out? Where in the different flows is there a drop off? So you can actually look at those and get the visibility to say, oh, this tool, it works, but it's taking 10x the speed we want. Is it the tool? Is it not? And then you can make adjustments that way.
Yeah.
Or be able to see, all right, we are running this check, drop off rates 80%. That is unacceptable. Now being able to look at that one single point of your user journey of all your risk strategy and say, this point is where we're having the issues. How do we adapt here? So then you can have better visibility, actually know the impact, and then see if you have any speed issues. Because if speed matters, then if you aren't able to say this provider runs in this amount of time, this provider runs in this amount of time, what's the variance? And then that way you can go to your orchestrators and say, is this a you? Is this an us? Is this a them? And then figure out what the root cause of that. Or is this just always how it's this vendor is going to be? Okay, that's the case. Are
And
we
you
willing
can
to
choose
accept
to
that? Yes or no?
really skip them. Yeah. And like, I think like, you know, the customer journey thing is huge. It's like, you get that visibility in individually. Cause it used to be like, you know, especially historically on like us fraud fighters, we would see like the referred URL. So we would see where they were before. And then, so you could kind of tell if people were kind of trying to cut in like directly into like a product page or directly into like even a checkout flow. So you could kind of make a guess if they were like doing some sort of cookie manipulation or something there. But historically, like we were kind of blind before that. Then, you know, of course, we tried to do things like move our fraud tools to login or move them to account registration. And we could see a little more, you know, but like that middle part was kind of always, or even the before part, you know, is like, what were they up to? And that's a great point is like you could see as you introduce these new tools, the disruption at an individual point, you know, and you could find out like one of the things, you know, that we found out recently is like, it wasn't necessarily something that we had done, but it was how JavaScript overlays were being displayed on our hosted payments page. And that's not anything that we can do on our side. You know, at the end of the day, that's something that needs to be done by our payment processor. But we were finding out that something was happening in that area, specifically in this region. And we needed to find out why. And we figured out like by putting a layer on top that it was having problems rendering the 3DS overlay, which I think has been a pretty common complaint for 3D Secure 1.0 experiences for, I don't know, a decade or more. But that's just further proof that we need to get away from this challenge model of 3D Secure, go to a fully frictionless future. But, you know, try telling these legacy banks that, you know, at the end of the day. But I think it is going to be, you know, another thing that's happening too is like there's these app clip things that I don't know if you guys have ever seen these, but they kind of are like miniature apps, so you don't have to download your full application. Like I could send you a link to a product on iHerb, and it's a really small, light thing that's inline basically in the text message, and you click it and it goes straight to the product page, and you can add it and check out right then and there. Same thing with like QR codes. Like if you're like at a Subway or something, you could scan this QR code. It takes you right to this like basically mini app that's not the app. So you don't have to have the app downloaded. It still has a checkout experience and all that. But in order to do that, there's very strict size limitations on the app. It's 10 megabytes. So 10 megabytes in 2023 is like 0 megabytes, just so everybody knows. And we have been trying to work with our fraud tools to make sure that those channels are secured so that we can offer that flexibility, but still work within the confines. And it comes back to your latency thing is as people, like marketing, everybody has their ideas of these different things that they need to have included on these tags, Google Tag Manager and all that. But every one of them adds to some sort of latency situation. And you want to try and get, I think the average attention span was like with like 7 seconds max. 3 is the goal that you really want. And that's for checkout. That's like spinning your little checkout thing. So a lot of people try and hide the latency calls by having something spinning some sort of animation of some kind. But you don't want to add everything. And you can put things earlier in the process. Just hit my mic. That was awesome. You could add things earlier in the process to try and cut down on latency at the end. But for fraud fighters, it's always been the checkout button is when we load everything. And if anybody else is trying to load any other tags in there, you're going to cut the latency down. But it's just all of these little things where things keep having to get smaller and faster and faster and faster, but our tools are trying to get more complex. That's where I think like adding orchestration layers in is really, really useful because you can cut down a lot of that stuff earlier, or even if it's necessary or not. You can make that determination if it's even necessary to do these things, because if you've seen this person 500,000 times, everything's the same. Why do you need to pump them for IDP? Why do you need to hit ping a kata on them? Just let them go. Let them go.
No, that's the point of having the single view. You probably already have the data you need to be able to make a decision to say, this is matching up. If it matches up 80%, 90%, 99%, whatever it may be, your thresholds, then least amount of friction. And then you can just kind of create different levels of friction of what to include at each step. So the majority of your traffic is going to have low latency. And then the more friction, that's where it really kind of starts to come in.
Alexander, how you doing over there?
I'm doing well. You guys are covering it.
Just listen to us go back and forth over here.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one thing I wanted to add. I think it's very important. And Brian, you just started to touch on that, which is the value of accurate determinations for good customers. If we know, well, Jordan, you started it, Brian, you were extending on it. If we know who is a good customer, we know that we can lighten their load. We can lighten their friction and all of that going forward. When we talk about lifetime values of businesses for our payment processors, for our financial institutions, that's a huge deal. And that's why, as we're moving into this financial institution adoption rate increase that we're moving into, I think it's super important that among the operational viability of these products, we talk about how orchestration can be good at plugging in all these different technologies. We talk about the idea of whether or not we should build it ourselves or hire someone third party. We talked about the idea of what technology is more viable across the customer journey. We also talked about how every point across the customer journey needs to be taken care of. And the answer to all of that is orchestration. I totally agree with that. I think, Jordan, you said it, orchestration in 10 years is going to be the fundamental fraud prevention platform across everything because it encompasses everything. Any vendor can partner up and do this. But I think the one thing that I would add to the conversation is the idea of accuracy. So at the first point, build it or buy it. Well, we can have someone who's very good dealing with our proprietary information, build out something for our system and probably get decent results. Or we can hire the company that is full of teams of people who have been experiencing similar use cases across an entire industry to bring that to the table. That's going to increase our accuracy, and it's also going to give us visibility into situations where we have a first seen client or customer. We get to leverage the third-party data so that they might be new to us, but they don't have to be new to us, you understand? Moving forward from there, it's important to understand that with orchestration, every interaction is an opportunity to increase accuracy. We might have account onboarding where we have one data point, one data set that we're leveraging, and we have historical performance data across some third-party vendor, and that's just one interaction. Well, that first interaction can be reinforced by the second interaction. How do they interact with the login form? How do they build their cart? What deposits, what withdrawals are they making? Right? Each one of these is an opportunity to get more information about our customers and make the decision as to whether or not they should be viewed as suspicious or given that low friction treatment or so on. And so I just wanted to drill down on the idea of accuracy being provided by third-party vendors, third-party data providers, orchestration across the entire journey. Accuracy is key.
That's a good point, because we recently had an attack where it was a hybrid attack. So they knew where our touch points were that we were currently monitoring for actual like bot stuff. And they would do humans on that part, and then they would bot and script the middle parts of the sessions. So like it was a real, and we threw a lot of things at it in order to slow it down. And they were pretty good about where we were monitoring and all that. And that's where it comes back to like that same point, like you just said, is like when you can see the whole thing, we can really watch what they're doing after that next point. Like they did this and then they did that, because like they would basically, it was a completely hybrided thing, and it was difficult. We fixed it, but it was difficult.
Well, congrats, bro.
Thank you. So Brian, you've been doing another thing that I like. You for Dodgeball specifically, you've been putting out these little things like kind of like a breaking newscast on YouTube, and which do of course make it their way over to LinkedIn, and you're talking about like breaking fraud news. So tell us a little bit about that and how that's going and all that fun stuff.
It started with our founder CEO Adam putting together a curation of lists. He obviously, if you're building a company, it's really important to kind of keep a close ear of new stories, what's happening. So he's been kind of curating his list of articles that kind of pique his interest throughout the week. And he shares it and just keeps people up to date that way. Kind of
That's pretty
typically
cool.
it's about 7 articles he's finds. And we see people like it. People were engaging with it. And then question came up like, hey, Brian, do you ever read them? I'm like, no, I don't usually read through lists. That's not how I digest things. And that's kind of where it spun off. I'm like, what if I started reading the articles and then read these articles to people and gave them like the super condensed bit of like 7 articles? They're all probably 3 to 5 minutes long. People aren't going to find that time to read it. Everyone's not going to read it, or at least every week. So it's like, I'll save that. You save it within your LinkedIn. You did the little 3 buttons and you click save. Not everyone actually knows the save post button. So
Yeah, I accidentally
there you
save things all
go.
the time, and then I have to unsave them all the time.
Exactly. I scroll through them like, well, never got to that, never got to that. So instead of them going there, what if I just read through them, created just this quick little bit of I try to keep it about 3 minutes is my goal. Take 5 articles that connect with me most. So I take his 7, I find 5 of that, and I read it within 3 minutes, 753. And it's some weeks are challenging for me to kind of write those because I have to write a little bit of a script for it and then record them, and then we kind of rip it and go. I try to not overproduce it or anything. That's kind of the piece I go with of trying to just keep it simple, raw, and then I just throw a backdrop on it of making it seem like I'm at a breaking news desk.
That's fun though. You know, I appreciate you, and I appreciate you making those 3 minutes, because there are some other content folks that can take a 3-minute article and make it an hour and a half long podcast episode, you know. But
I mean,
that's
you know my content, and you know from talking to me, I can expand on the content very easily. And I think about it bite-sized bits in LinkedIn, a little bit drawn out on newsletter, and then newsletter becomes a book. It's just building on it. So
I'm happy that you're doing that book.
Complex ideas, making it very quick and easy. And maybe if I have a killer point, it just comes out over 5 days. And it's just like super digestible and not a big request. You said it already, people have the attention span of 7 seconds. If my content or anything really takes longer than 7 seconds, more the reading it. I got to cook you within 7 seconds for you to click and watch more. But then it's almost that repetition. I got to keep your attention for every 10 seconds. So that's how I think about it. There's a little bit of psychology that goes behind it all.
Did you on any of your breaking newses? I might be behind a day or two. You didn't put any of the stuff from the fraud fighter controversy over the last couple of weeks, did you?
I didn't want to steal your thunder. I feel like you did a great job breaking it, and probably one of the most commented pieces that I've come across on LinkedIn. Definitely in the last month, but probably of the year, and just how LinkedIn's probably been probably in a long time, at least in the fraud space. And
it did hit. It had a pretty wide. It was the widest reaching post that I've ever had. It was like as of like a week ago, it was like 16,000 impressions in our industry, which is pretty big for folks that, like, it might not sound that big for a regular LinkedIn post. You know, those people that put those inspiring, you know, today I got laid off, but it's okay because I have my dog on. My mental health is perfect, and it's going to be a new day tomorrow, and the sun is shining, and all that happy horse shit. But for this one, it was a lot. And for those that don't really know, and I'm gonna talk about it because I want to, and I'm media. There's a company called Cion that's been around in our industry since, I believe, 2017 was when they started. I think right around there. So about 6 years, and they kind of corner the market as far as, like, if you have a Shopify store and you want to do a plugin, you can go and you can go to the Shopify marketplace, and you can add Cion, and it's like a free version. There's like a monthly fee version. There's a couple of different levels. So they kind of corner that market for those SMB businesses that are selling like t-shirts, or, you know, like you started a clothing brand during COVID and then you got ripped on some fraud, and then you add a couple of things. It's a easy to manage price on there. Now, they have been industry adjacent for a really long time. I'm reluctant to say that they've been in the fraud industry because they've kind of been on the outside. Like they've had some people that have worked in our industry work for them, but those people usually don't work for them for very long. And one of the things with Sion is like they have a ton of funding, which was pretty par for the course during right before COVID, going into COVID. I think they got their last big round in like 21. It was like $94 million. So like their total raise, according to Crunchbase, is like 107, almost $108 million, which is a ton of money in our industry. Like you don't see people raising that level of money currently, like you see like the 15, 18, $20 million things. I think $30 million on one of them a couple of weeks ago. Money's coming back a little bit, but I think they're being a little tighter around how they do it, especially coming out of the SVB stuff that happened back in March. But what this company tried to do is they tried to trademark the word fraud fighter. And it's one thing to do that and not act on it, but they chose to act on it. So they chose to start sending some cease and desist letters to some other solution providers in the marketplace. And I am told some other individuals that work in our industry too. That one, I've seen a couple of the ones to solution providers. I have not seen the ones to individuals, so I won't say definitively. Now, I don't know Sion's product, so I can't say if it's good or great or not. Like I don't have any opinion about the effectiveness of the product. I only have an opinion about the attitude of the leadership and the legal team. And I put on there on LinkedIn, like a question about when people who work in this industry, when they first started using calling themselves a fraud fighter, which I think is pretty well-known lexicon for our industry. Like that's kind of what we've always called ourselves in some capacity, whether it be a joke or not. We're fighting fraud every day. That's what we do. So we're a fraud
It's an
fighter.
identity. It's a professional identity
Yeah.
that people just kind of come around. It's like I'm a
Yeah.
marketer, I'm an accountant, I'm a fraud fighter. It's
And
just
like even
that type of verbiage.
Yeah, and there's like even like Eamon like Murphy's called himself like a fraud fighting Jedi for like as long as I've known that guy, like more than 10 years, And I think for me personally, it felt like an attack on me. And I think for a lot of people that have spent a great amount of time in this industry, it felt like an attack on them. And they had a right to know that this was happening in our industry with a player that's new. Now, I will say that Tomas, their founder, did jump into the comments, and I was very careful. I didn't put their name in my post. I just wanted to know the dates. And of course, like Frank McKenna, Frank on Fraud was like the very first person to comment. And he was like, I was calling myself a fraud fighter in the 90s. And when he comments on anything, like it gets a pretty good reach because he's a very popular person, and that ended up like
respected
really,
nonetheless.
yeah.
I think there's difference between popularity and respect. I think he's
and
got
he's
it.
OG, he's OG.
Absolutely.
Like he's not just like a lot of us, like a lot of us that are in this industry specialize in CNP fraud. Like that's what we do. That's just what we've always done. And Frank has done like all of it. He does check fraud. He does like scams, like brick and mortar fraud. Like Frank does it all, and like he's like the godfather of the fraud industry. And the fact that he was commenting on there, and he like I think he said like 94 or 98, somewhere in there. It was like a really long time that he's been calling it. And then you had other people that were early 2000s. I think a lot of people, because our industry really hit its stride in like the early 2010s, especially when the economy started coming back. That's when I saw the vast majority of people were in there, but almost all of them were before 2017. Now, I will say that Sion has since changed their name to be called, instead of just Sion, to call themselves Sion Fraud Fighters. And Sion did have their PR company reach out to me to discuss. Now, I'm going to go back a minute because when I had heard that this was happening, I did reach out to Sion first before I put up my post. And I asked if they cared to comment because I was going to publish. And they did not really take it seriously on that and basically were dismissive about when I asked them. I tried to be like, would you like to respond to this? Which then led Tomas to jumping in and trying to rationalize why he was doing it, saying he was trying to do a backhanded thing where he's like, I appreciate the spirited conversation about this, which I didn't really appreciate. But I think the other responses to his initial response from people like Andrew at CarMax, I think really gave him a dose of reality that was necessary on what the vast majority of us enterprise level folks think about our profession and what we do. And we always joke about that this is like fraud fighting as a community, and that's where we're unique that we share, but we are unique in the way that we are passionate about our jobs. in a way that most people aren't. Like all the anti-work stuff that you see on Reddit, all the work reform, all those people that like are quiet quitting and all that. You don't see that happen a lot from fraud fighters that have been in this industry for a long time, because we love what we do. And I think that was a shock. Not only that, like I had that particular level of audience after I was dismissed trying to contact them earlier, but then the reaction to that was not a positive reaction. And I don't care like if you trademark that type of phrase. I care if you act on it in a malicious way to try and diminish something that you are not really a part of in the way that you think you are. And they're not a part of this industry the way that they think they are. They are adjacent to this industry and they have a product that works for SMBs, but they are not a top level company in this space to be taking something away from us that operate in this level. And I know you guys have to be delicate about what you say and how you say it, and that's fine. But I'd like to know your guys' thoughts. The best that you can say it, dancing around. And to add one more thing, one of the clients that they sent a cease and desist to was a partner of theirs that is also an orchestrator that they rely on to get into these sorts of businesses. Why would you do that? Like, why would you try to stop a company that's trying to help you from doing? The misstep that this was mind-blowing for me in this industry. And it leads me all the way back to I'm having flashbacks from NS8, which they raised a ton of money too, and they were industry adjacent. And they started just acting really strangely in our industry, and it ended up being this whole thing. Like everybody, you can Google NS8 and read about that. So thoughts, prayers.
I'll say it like this. A lot of work that I do internally is around being the voice of the fraud community. And that means something completely different every single week. I get the question, why do you go to the dark side? Well, it was a challenge of what I wanted to see. It was a cool product that I wanted to help build. It's giving me access to parts of an early stage company that I would never get if I took solely a fraud role. So there's a lot of internal bits of that. But being one of the few, at least when I joined, I was the only non-technical person. Part of what I had to do is translate what the end market thinks, says, does. And then that goes into the product vision, product strategy, how we build a product that actually aligns with buyers of what they actually care about. That's piece one, have to be functional. Piece two is position, and this is more to your point, positioning, messaging, public brand awareness, and the perception of the fraud community. So I do a lot of work within educating our marketing and sales team, the people doing the outreach, and those other channels of speaking with the fraud community. Because I mean, there's companies that have bad reputations of, if I get an email from this company, I don't really want to talk to them. If I get an email from this company, I'm open to it because I know that they have people that they hire fraud experts. They hire practitioners to help teach, educate. Sometimes the company grows too fast or gets too big that those roles get a little bit more specialized. But I think today it's an advantage for companies to hire practitioners to be more of the voice of the community and then feed that into other avenues. And I think this is one crucial piece of alignment, of misalignment and misunderstanding of the market and audience, where is a huge core pillar to my own role of making sure I coach my team, making sure I help with account research so they're educated what one company might care about or think about versus the other, despite being the same size, same industry, same a lot of variables, and then try to communicate why one is different from the other. So part of it for me is alignment and how you align. And I know in like my newsletter, I talk a lot about alignment internally. I guess alignment is just following me everywhere, but I talk a lot about alignment of aligning fraud teams with marketing teams and engineering teams and other teams. So you have partners and stakeholders to get your initiatives through and not just always being swatted to the side, but on the vendor side now of if you can't sell to anyone because there's a misalignment, there's this gap, the your buyer isn't going to find your product valuable.
Yeah.
The buyer won't want to talk to you for XYZ. So it's, for me, helping close that gap. Vendors are always going to have that gap. You're a vendor, you're on the other side. There will always be a gap, but it's about shortening that gap and helping communicate better. There's this one sales marketing person that her slogan is "Show me you know me," and that's a huge component that I try to reinforce back into our company of show the people you're trying to talk to that you actually know them. And
That's interesting.
it's not like, hey, Brian, you went to college here, go Falcons. It's way more than that. It's about being relevant to what they care about today.
So that's a good way to put it, and I think like we've talked about this before on even on my own show. It's like good fraud companies hire fraud people. And like, even when you're like, I had to go, people ask me all the time when I went to the dark side. Well, at least like you came from this industry, like, at least you didn't come from the outside where there's like that misalignment, because you see all of these, especially like new sales folks. And I talked about it on a sales episode that I did before last MRC, the MRC Vegas, where it's like, you see all these companies, they hire new salespeople straight out of college, which is nothing wrong with that. Everybody's got to cut their teeth somewhere, but they are not really super familiar with what's happening in our industry and how their product might be, as you say, aligned in the marketplace. So they will say, well, you could fire all your fraud people because our product will do it all. When in reality, it doesn't really do that. Like Xeon, I think, as far best like I've been told by people that have used it, is like their real good strong suit is like their social media. So crawling social media profiles and determining if the people are real that way, which that, has gotten a lot harder over the last few years, especially with GDPR and CCPA here in California. Like what you can and can't scrape is getting to be a little harder to do, and that's great. They probably have a great, huge database of all that. But what you do as far as when you can, like what you get from like a service like Spot or Shopify, in order to act on that, you get very little information. Shopify has to consider their reputation too. They don't want to be giving all this information away that like you've input, so like I think there's something like 11 or 12 fields that you can get, and if Shopify already has, like, they give you a great deal of intelligence already on fraud risk, and especially with Shop Pay these days, like they have like a whole indemnification thing and all that. I just think it's really interesting when somebody comes in and says, okay, we're fraud fighters, without really paying attention to the rest of the market. Because I don't know, like anybody that's spent a lot of time in our industry knows, like all these, like we've coexisted forever with all of these different solutions. Like you hang out with other orchestrators, like rules engine companies hang out with other rules engine companies. They all go to the same parties in the end of the night. They all drink with each other. They all hang out. Everybody gets along. Well, they're all trying to like fight for the same customer pool. But at the end of the day, like I said on the other podcast, I know now it doesn't mean no forever when it comes to fraud tools, So it's like, granted, you put in the time, you get to know me as a merchant, and like I might be over here one day, and then you might have the new hotness this next year, and then I'm over here, but at the same time, they know that I might come over there, I might go over here, or any of that. But you don't really want to, like when I was telling, like what I said in the comments on this article is like, you don't want to be the company that everybody's talking shit about at those cocktail hours. You don't want to be the butt of the joke. You don't want every other solution provider saying, at least I'm not X. Not really X. Sorry, Elon. Didn't mean to you just change your company. At least I'm not somebody else, or that one there. But at the end of the day, like it's still like all I can think about these days. And like we don't get a whole lot of major fraud drama in our fraud industry. I mean, maybe some behind the scenes stuff, but we don't get a whole lot of drama in the fraud world. But so when something like this happens, it sticks out. And I know that probably wasn't their intent. And I'm sure that they hired a third-party legal company that goes and looks at these sorts of things. But at the same time, like, you don't want to be the pariah out there, like you just don't want to be that. And I don't know why this particular one, because I don't know this company, because they don't hire fraud people. They don't hire like people that I'm familiar with. They are a European company that has European roots, and that's totally fine. It's why, like, I don't know why you would come in trying to swinging like this, because you don't understand our industry and you don't know what's going to happen, but you put out all this data and you have all this social media presence that talks about how great you are and how much you do know without using that same platform to find out what we really do. Like, clearly you can see that, like, I'm connected to literally everybody else in this industry. You're connected to everybody else in this industry. Like, we all, like, if this was an actual family, like, we'd have kids with 3 arms everywhere. That's just what would happen. But like, I don't know. It really rubbed me the wrong way. And I know that they sent their PR team to talk to me, and I sat with them for a long time. And like, they tried to tell me the reasons why, that they don't want another company to start with the word fraud fighter and blah, 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 blah. And I understand like what they're trying to do. I understand what they're trying to accomplish. But they also think that they created this word fraud fighter when they didn't. They came into this industry just because they probably saw money was being made here. And that's why they're here. They're not here because they love it. They're not here because they love being fraud fighters. They weren't fraud fighters. They saw opportunity, and that's why they exist here. And there's nothing wrong with that in the capitalistic business sense of the word, but you don't get to be the friend of the industry by doing that. And you don't get to change how we operate as an industry and tell us we can't call ourselves something we've called ourselves our entire lives. Sorry, guys. That's just how it is. So Alexander, you've been sitting over there listening to me go on my rant, as I often do. You have experience with Cion, I think, as well. So what are your thoughts on it?
Early 2022, I did an assessment for Cion. I assessed their data, their technology, their strategic approach, and the overall subject matter expertise of how their data and technology are being leveraged against their particular use cases and their ICPs. During that time, I found 2 very valuable nuggets. They're leveraging device data, and they're leveraging meta data, right? Metacognitive data centered around social media. But I was impressed with the way that they were leveraging the data that they had at their disposal, being leveraged strategically by their subject matter experts. I loved Jimmy over there was always my a good buddy of mine, and I always appreciated his powerful mind. That being said, I do agree with you with regard to, I don't think that this decision that they made, there's 2 points about this decision that they made. One is what you guys have already said. This whole industry is about collaboration, right? That's actually what this whole call has been about. When we're talking about orchestration, we're talking about determination processes down the line. It calls for different technology at different touch points for different reasons in order to make the most accurate determination, for better or for worse, to approve or deny. Cion fits in, right? Cion needs to fit in. So that's the first point. They needed to identify the alignment that that they were able to provide, not take, provide, right? So that was a big deal. And I think the second point is, to continue along that point, they broke a lot of alignment, especially the partnership that you mentioned, Jordan. I don't see how that's going to be a positive thing in the long run. The second thing is, what could this approach have accomplished? To take the term that we all call ourselves and try to own it. Like, what could it have? Right? In my opinion, and sorry, Cion, I love you guys, but in my opinion, if I were CMO or something, I would project to say that going into a community of mechanics and trying to capitalize on the term mechanic just doesn't work.
That's a good point.
Right? So the only thought process there is, we have SEO viable words and terms in the form of fraud fighters, and whatever they get, we want to own. And I'm sorry, Cion, dude. I love your product and I love you guys personally. But no, I think that was a really bad move. And I hope you guys recover for it. Best of luck.
Well, enough about them. Yeah. So, Bros Talking Fraud. What are you guys working on this week? Anything interesting this week? We are November 7th. It's probably going to come out in like 2 weeks. What are you guys doing for gearing up? Anything for Black Friday? You guys got any not only for work lists, do you have any like Target stuff you guys are trying to get for yourselves for Christmas?
I got a child, so it kind of goes to that of like what deals. All of a sudden, we don't know where it came from. He's all into Spider-Man, so getting some Spider-Man gear probably.
How about that brand new Spider-Man 2 game on PS5? You know, he might want to play that too. Just saying.
He's not old enough. He is very far away. I give what we're at the level where I'll play video games and he just wants a controller without batteries and he's cool. And he
Yeah.
just kind of
So,
like
so,
walks
so it sounds
around
like
with
he
it.
still needs that game, right? You know what I mean?
Maybe.
I'm in the same boat. Everything. My baby is into Legos now. She's gotten into her creative mode where
pretty
she
cool.
makes everything out of Legos, and we do story time with Legos and Pokemon. She was Charizard for Halloween,
Oh,
so she's getting into the strategy of Pokemon. She's really artsy. She loves to create, and she loves these little worlds. So I'm really happy to encourage her to build with Legos, and she's also very scientific. So we play with like magnetism and gravity and these different like hot. Remember when we were kids, we had Hot Wheels, right?
yeah,
The
the
trucks that we
loop
built.
tracks and all that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now they have these little marble tracks that you drop from a high point and you let gravity swoop and swirl and you make like little roller coaster tracks out of them. And she loves that stuff. So it's all science, Legos, and Pokemon in my house.
I don't have kids, but I think it's been on enough of these podcasts. Hopefully by the time this episode comes out, I'm buying a new house. So hopefully by the time this one comes out, I will have moved in. So I'm targeting getting some Sonos outdoor speakers. Well, thank you guys for joining me. You know, while we just kind of rambled on, and I got to say my piece about some of the frustrations that I've had over the last couple of weeks. Brian, pretty happy to be a part of what you're building over there. So as we keep sharing more information on from your side about that, like I'd love to just keep having you on, talk about what you're doing. As we release new things, I'll keep sharing the things on there. I think the community that you're going to build is going to be super interesting because it's a different type, you know, of community versus like just question and answer. Like having interaction, having content is always, and I like to create content now. That's kind of a new thing that I didn't realize, but since starting the podcast,
Fun.
I like to create stuff. It is, you know, it is fun. Like I actually even want to start another podcast with my staff because we golf a lot. I want to do like Fraud Bros golfing, but I don't know if anybody will listen, and I just haven't had the time to put it together. Because, you know, for anybody that doesn't realize, these podcasts take a little while to put together, putting the notes, getting
Scheduling,
the time.
wireframes, chasing after people, recording, editing, distributing, writing content for the distribution. There's a lot that goes behind the scenes.
Each episode takes a minimum of probably about 6 hours to do fully for a 145-minute episode, you know, and if you're recording multiple a week, it can be a lot, you know, like I
think that applauds you of that's why you see a lot of people, not just like in our space in general. The idea is most people quit after 2 podcast episodes because they realize that the first one, they're excited. They get through one, and then they do the second one, and then they're like, yeah, I don't want to do any more of this. And then it's gone. So it's an applause to you of actually being able to build a process to it, structured or unstructured. You have a process behind it. It's easy to work with you, which also makes it easier as a guest to just kind of show up and know how conversation is going to flow, and then how I can start the way out.
Thank you. Yeah, I try to do like it is. You're right. Like once I have the framework done, so like if I send out notes, like there's an outline that automatically goes out, and then all of the scheduling is done automatically through those wonderful calendar links that you guys both get to see all the time. But it makes it a lot easier because it puts it into your court for when you guys are available. We don't have to be like sending a bunch of emails back and forth. And then I love Google, the Google Docs thing, like the collaboration. Yeah. Well, thank you guys both for coming. I'll put links to both of you on there. Bros Talking Fraud. Always nice to jump on. I love that we can just fill an hour and a half of time without even having any script or anything, but you guys are the best. So we're going to do it again.
Let's do it.
All right, guys. We'll talk soon. Thanks for listening to today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to visit our incredible friends and sponsor, Spec. Get your holiday team ready with full visibility into the customer journey all season long using their patented no-code orchestration platform, and be ready for whatever comes your way with the ability to collect data, call third-party APIs, build logic and workflows, all with the ability to take action anywhere in the entire customer journey. Visit www.specprotected.com to schedule your demo and learn more. Thank you.